So Christopher, I wonder if you might share what that work looks like in educator preparation to really build inclusive classrooms that really address the amazing intersectionalities, the identities, and the dignities of the children that our future educators will have.
So I first want to just say thank you to Alfredo, who's been, I can't say enough great things about him. He's been a great mentor, friend, and colleague through the years, and so thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Magali, for inviting me to the panel. I will say that, and I'll be brief, but I am, and Magali and Alfredo know I'm very critical when we come to these conversations on teacher preparation and what occurs and what doesn't occur. And so as far as students with disabilities, I'll say that we've done a poor job at educating teachers to know how to work with students with disabilities, one, but two, knowing how to work with students with disabilities from minoritized backgrounds. When there's so many people in the field of special education that feel that they do equity work just because they're working with kids with disabilities, but don't believe that the work should be disaggregated to understand the unique racialized components or linguistic differences of those students. And so when we have a program, I put myself on the line, even whether at LMU or any place, Stanford, the universities are set up and the state programs are set up where you get your credential, where if you're a gen ed teacher across the country, you will take roughly one class in special education, one. And that one class usually is a disability of the week model, where you learn about how to work with a kid with autism, or learn how to work with a kid with this or that, or any of the 13 categories that the federal government classifies for special education services. It's not enough. It's in many ways, I'll even be straightforward, it's in many ways a joke. That how do we expect gen ed teachers to understand the complexities of working with kids with disabilities when they haven't had adequate training? And then they have 5 or 6 or 8 kids in their classroom who need certain services. When I was a special ed teacher, I was more critical. And my attitude was, well, that's your job, do it. And it took a long time. I still feel that way. I'll say it took a long time, though, for me to have a little more empathy and to understand that as a gen ed teacher, yeah, it is your job, but they don't have the training that I have. And they have 40 students with 8 kids who have an IEP with maybe 1 special education teacher in the whole campus. And so what are pre-service programs doing? If the state is only requiring 1 class, I think it's on pre-service programs to scale up and require more. But universities have moved in such a model across the country where they're wanting to appease. It's very consumerist. How do we get students in and get them out and make the most money? And so then that creates a problem, because one thing that goes on the chopping block is the special education programs or students and not gen ed teachers having that understanding of what it means to work with this population of students. So I think that's the main thing, as far as it starts with how do we make sure that gen ed programs in particular are training these teachers to understand how to work with these kids. And then also in school environments, I'll say, that when you have, let's say on a Wednesday, teachers are required to have a professional development. Usually as a special education teacher, I can tell you that those professional developments usually are a waste of time. It was usually something that we were required to be at, but it usually had nothing to do with the students that I worked with. But it created a challenge, because how do you go to your principal? How does the principal go to the director of curriculum instruction and say that the special education teacher shouldn't be at this meeting that everyone else is supposed to be required at, but they're there when they could be working on IEP or dealing with an issue with a student or providing additional tutoring or supports. And so there needs to be a better way of making sure that there's a more inclusive model of professional development in schools. And I'll say lastly that I remember when I was teaching, every year at the beginning of the year when you go over the test scores, and it was usually students served in special education programs who was bringing down the school test scores. And so all the SPED teachers were sitting at the table, and you're going over the test scores, and then immediately, then the principal says, and now we get to special education. And you can feel everyone looking at the special education teachers, like it was the special education teachers' fault that these students weren't being supported. So I think that it's a very complex issue. But the reality is that until we can make sure that there's enough training at the pre-service level, I don't see anything necessarily changing for special education students and being able to have adequate resources and understandings from their teachers.